I met JJ just as he was about to have his 3 children taken away from him permanently to be forcefully adopted against their will. JJ told me that he was a victim of domestic violence and he had made the mortal mistake of revealing to social services and his doctors that he was suffering from depression and PTSD as a result of this abuse. Rather than helping him, social services set their sights on his 3 children, and before JJ knew it, his children were taken from him and put up for forceful adoption. I tried to get in touch with JJ after his children were taken, and I couldn't find him for months. Finally, having found him in January 2022, he brought me up to speed on all that had happened since his children were stolen from him. As you know, we've been talking for a minute, and most recently I sought you on Facebook and I couldn't find you. I couldn't find your page. I couldn't find your picture. And knowing how down you were last time because your kids were stolen from you, I was actually worried that you had committed suicide. I'm very happy that you didn't, and we got in touch. Tell me what's happened since we last spoke.
I was raided in end of November by a special team of police who forced my door late at night, fully armed. 12 police officers sealed off the street, smashed into my home and threw me on the floor with guns pointing to me and my head. I was told to get on my knees. I complied with that, and they handcuffed me and said I was arrested under the Terrorism Act. I was then rushed to a South Wales police station, a high-category police station, where I was locked up for 48 hours, and then I was then interviewed by military intelligence, Mi5, by 2 young military officers who said they were from Mi5, and I said, why am I here? And they said that we believe that you are inciting terrorism. I said, that's not actually correct. I'm not inciting anything. Please expand on this. And whilst I was being held without any legal counsel because I was being held in the Terrorism Act and I wasn't allowed any solicitor that was told they could hold me indefinitely under the terrorism law without any sort of legal representation. They bullied me. So they went on to say about these groups that are constantly saying storming Parliament, and ongoing concerns about my groups that I was heading up political groups in relation to parents coming forward to go in Parliament to expose these people who are stealing our children, and asked about a lot of the members on these Facebooks, such as Billy O'Connor, that are inciting protests, and they felt that was a real risk to the UK government that there might be some kind of terrorism act against Parliament or the Prime Minister or any MP. And I had growing concerns about parents speaking out about us, about children being taken. So I said, well, am I being charged with anything? They said, yes, well, you may be charged with inciting terrorism. I said, how can you say I'm inciting terrorism? I have freedom of speech. They said there's no such as freedom of speech when it comes to people storming Parliament, and we were real concerns that an act of terrorism will happen, and we believe because of these groups, support groups that you also calling support groups are gathering thousands of parents who are at risk that something may happen. So you're inciting, and as a result, we're investigating you. I said, well, you can investigate all you want. So they asked me in relation to these groups that I'm a moderator on, or admin. They interviewed me for 24 hours without any food or sleep. They were ruthless to me, withheld medication. In the meantime, whilst I was being interviewed, I was constantly embarrassed. I was put down. They said, would you come, look, we can make things easier. You can come and, work for us and, be a confidential informant. I said, it's not going to fucking happen. It's not going to fucking happen. I said, the day that I be an informant for this government or MI5, you can go fuck yourselves. I was quite aggressive, and they said, you're an aggressive person. I said, well, you dragged me out of bed at 2 a.m. in the morning, and you're saying to me, you've been an aggressive person. Well, you stole my children because I've got PTSD. I've been traumatized, and you've sold my children. They said that we're not interested in that. All we're interested in is the incite of terrorism with these groups, support groups, and you're heading up these groups with Billy O'Connor. as a result, you're on our radar. I said, I'm there to support any parent. I've not acted on nothing. I've not incited anyone to go and blow up any shit. I've not incited anyone to hurt anybody. All I've said is, with Billy O'Connor, let's protest, let's get the word out there, let's speak out, let's get people to talk out about these things and bring it to the public's attention. That's all I've done. And they went on to say, well, what you're doing is you're aggravating people to do unlawful things, i.e. terrorism. I said, how can you say that? I said, I've not asked anyone to do anything. They said, but you're exposing names and addresses of social workers. I said, no, I haven't. I said, I've named social workers, yes, because they're coming on our groups, spying on our groups. They said, well, that could cause terrorism. You're putting people's lives at risk, these social workers. I said, how do you expect that I'm putting people's lives at risk? If social services and social workers come on these groups pretending to be parents, they shouldn't be on there. My right is to expose a social worker on the group so we can kick them out and expose them. We don't want moles inside those groups. They went on to say to me, well, they don't need to be moles. We can see the groups. We have access to everything. We can see every member. We can see every... I said, well, I know you're spying bastards anyway. So we know. So why would I incite something on a media platform that everyone can see to have myself arrested? Because I'm here on what? On bullshit. Because I spoke out about my children being stolen because I had PTSD. You sold my fucking children, and now you arrested me under the Terrorism Act. What the fuck is all that about? After a lengthy conversation with them, obviously went dark, as you know, for a couple of months over this, and as you realise, I wouldn't get any messages from yourself or from the people who usually supported me through this. But people got to understand that the problem being is the government are really scared and are trying to bully people now under the Terrorism Act now. First it was contempt. I was told if I speak out about my children, I'll be held in contempt. If I name my children, I'll be put in contempt. As you know, I've shown you a couple of people in jail now for speaking out about their children being forcibly adopted. But now that's not enough. Now they're raiding my house with military intelligence and threatening the Terrorism Act. There are two young officers who interviewed me from Mi5 clearly said, there is no freedom of speech in this country. I was like, what the fuck? Said, that's my right. No one will stop me from speaking out. They said, do you intend to carry on with these groups? I said, yes. They said, we'll be watching you. And we're watching Billy O'Connor. They named other people on the group as well. People need to be aware that they're being watched and monitored closely because we are upsetting the status quo in respect of Parliament running scared, the Prime Minister's running scared, that we're exposing the UK government as trafficking children. Because down to all this is what it is. There's big money behind forced adoptions. It's trafficking in money. It's a trafficking, and they're using that as a way of PLO fees as £32,320 or whatever they call it, just rounded off to 32 grand per child. The local authorities are getting. That is selling a child for money. If you did that in this country, okay, it's trafficking children. You would be jailed. So the government are trafficking children. It's not right.
I remember you were telling me a little bit about the history of this sort of thing.
Slavery was perfectly acceptable by the US and UK governments and worldwide to have black people as slaves. That was so fucking wrong. But in the eyes of Parliament in London and in the US, it was perfectly legal to have slaves, which is fucking disgusting. Now it's frowned on and people think it's disgusting. Then in the early 70s and the 60s, 70s and 80s in the UK, unmarried women, their children were removed from them and forced adopted. Right, that was perfectly legal for Parliament to do that in the UK. They were taking millions of children away from unmarried mothers in the UK and thought that was acceptable. Now they're apologising for it. They're saying, it was wrong. Now they're forcibly removing children from good people like myself who've suffered with PTSD, but the children have never seen my depression because I read it well. But if you've got any slight depression, or if you're a victim of domestic violence, or anything like that, or you reach out for help, they come and take your children. They think that's perfectly acceptable. But I reckon from a decade onwards now, that will be frowned on. But the damage is already done. They've damaged black people. And you can understand why Black Lives Matter are angry. You can understand why unmarried mothers now in their 80s, 70s and 80s are angry and have never seen their children who were forcibly removed because they were unmarried. Now it's affecting us. It's going to incite people to do dumb shit. I'm not the one to blame here. I'm the one who's just have exposed the truth for what it is. My local authority, okay, they don't just have that PLO fee, the £32,000 for each child, but they own their own fucking adoption agencies. So they're getting more fees for the adoption agencies. I reckon that the 3 children sold by the UK government in this country, for my 3 children, they've earned a region of £120,000 for 3 of my children. Now that's coming from the Treasury. The Treasury are funding abductions of children by being kidnapped under a crazy law that was brought in by the bonkers Tony Blair under potential future emotional harm. Well, how can you potentially say a child's potentially a target of future emotional harm? Well, you can't prove that or disprove that, but that doesn't give a right to have a child removed in this country from a family-loving parent. You know, they're separating siblings. You know, they're causing families to break down. There's parents committing suicide. You know, I'm on the edge, believe me, right? I actually went away and I sat in my camper van and I took a lethal dose of tablets and I fell asleep. I woke up 2 days ago. I don't want to really admit this, but I did take an overdose of sleeping tablets and unfortunately I came out of it. I say unfortunately because every day is painful for me to mourn children that are living. I feel my children are mourning a loss of the children that are living. And it all come on top of me, being raided by armed police and Mi5, and then the mourn of losing my children. I'm not just been threatened with contempt of court about speaking out about my children, and that's contempt with 8 years imprisonment without trial, without any jury, without any lawyers. A family court judge or high court judge can turn around and say you're in contempt of court for naming and speaking out about your children being adopted. 8 years imprisonment, there you go, end of story. How right is that? Because then I'm dealing with a contempt court order if I speak out about my children being forcibly removed by the UK government and sold. Now I'm being threatened by military intelligence. It all come on top of me and it ended up with me taking a load of sleeping tablets. I woke up 2 days later. I had to go dark for a while because it was a very traumatic time being held under terrorism as a parent who's a victim of this government, this Nazi government who have taken children. What they're doing is discriminating against people with depression. Low-income families are being targeted because they can't feed their children and are taken away because they're struggling on the bedline because of this government's minimum wage crap. You've got people who are depressed. If you go to the doctor, as soon as you say you're depressed, they alert the local authority. Every local authority, and they're made up, is a multiple agency support hub. It's an office where it's full of midwives, GPs, police officers, social workers and legal teams. They've got access to your medical records. They had access to my medical records without my consent. They knew I was depressed. They took my children away. I went through a rough time where, as you know, I was in a domestic violent relationship, but I was free from that. As soon as I spoke out about that to get help, my children were removed. It's a scary place to live in this world, especially in the UK. There's a lady, a black lady who I'm really friends with, called Ingrid. She WhatsApped me a few days ago, screaming, breaking down. She came from Africa to obtain a degree in this country, then to go on to do psychology. And social services mocked her and said she did a psychology degree as just as a joke and a mocking. No one comes from Africa with their children to do a degree and then to have their children removed from her. She's a beautiful woman. She broke down and I felt empty when I found it was like she was crying over the death of a child. And like her, she's had her children removed. She was telling me after she calmed down a couple of days after that another friend of hers who came from Africa to do a PhD, she was literally in the country less than 2 weeks and she had her children removed after trying to do a PhD. We need to wake up. We need to see that the government are bullying parents now with contempt of orders and raiding people's houses. We're not out there to stab people. We're not out there to blow shit up. We just want to protest. We just want the British people to hear the truth, because you're hiding it and it's threatening us with contempt of court. Now you've held me under the Terrorism Act because I am supporting parents that are going through it, because you don't like it. You don't like it because more and more people are getting to know about this. More and more people are waking up to what's going on. The illegal acts of what you're doing. They said, oh, well, we're not doing any illegal acts. You know, we're just here just to make sure that there's no untoward activity of terrorism towards the government. I said, look, so they went on to say to me, what was your view if someone, say a parent, went out and they bombed Parliament or something like that? I said, well, you know, I wouldn't condone it, but I'd understand it. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, but don't you understand that what you're doing then is you're inciting? No, I'm not inciting nothing. It's an opinion. Everybody's entitled to opinions. My opinion is you stole my fucking children, and if it means about us protesting out Parliament peacefully, I will fucking do it. If it's about standing out of the local authorities, councils, with banners, I will do it. Also, Latif, I don't know if you know him at all. I was questioned over him big time. They're really threatened by him.
Who is that?
They said he's a Muslim. I'm unaware of his beliefs and that, but they were concerned that I said he's a good, wholesome man. He has true, genuine beliefs. You stole his children, but you know he's a Muslim. I said, so, well, I didn't know he was a Muslim, no. But if he is, he's a very peaceful man. They said, do you think he has intentions of, because of his Muslim background, extremism, would he be capable of creating bombs? And I said, I said, what are you people on? I said, you're grasping at fresh air. You're picking on good, wholesome, decent people who wouldn't dream of doing things like that. All they're doing is creating news feeds, blogs, YouTube channels to expose the UK government. Aren't we entitled to voice our concerns in this country? They said no, because it's inciting people to do crazy shit. Do you know what? He's the most loving, gentle man you could ever think of, and he's a big player in relation to protesting and bringing to light these issues of the UK government and what they're doing. Everything we're doing is above board to expose what's going on in relation to the corruption in the UK. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, it's obviously a concern now to me that now I'm on an MI5 watch list because telling people what's going on. What it is, we are now embarrassing the UK government. We're embarrassing them that much that the more and more the British people know, because there's a complete media blackout on forced adoptions, as you're fully aware in the UK, mm-hmm. and the media blackout in forced adoptions can obviously be used as contempt. So journalists won't write about they can obviously write that it's happening in the UK, but it's very far between. You don't hear about it. Journalists are warned, should they speak about any particular cases, they'd be held in contempt. So there's a media blackout in relation to forced adoptions. We're embarrassing the government because more and more good standing people are getting to hear about it, and it's brought the attention of military intelligence now. So what I would say to people is exposing a social worker that is on a group of a support group for parents if you're prepared to expose yourself as a vulnerable parent or losing your child to forced adoption and posing yourself as one of those, and in fact you're a social worker gathering intelligence, then you have the right to be exposed and outed and named and shamed. And if that's your picture being shown on the group, so be it. If they want to be stupid and put themselves at risk by exposing themselves, these are angry parents. But again, I'm an angry parent, but I wouldn't go out and damage government property, and I wouldn't certainly not incite terrorism in any form of way. My only objective is to expose the UK government and the corrupt courts that what they're doing is illegal. People who are special on low incomes or on legal aid, family solicitors, they know they can't win cases. They're taking on cases and they're in with the government. Family solicitors in this country, they're not representing you. They're representing the government. Mm-hmm. They're getting legal aid. They're getting government funding. So you're getting a public attorney to represent you in a family court who's being paid by the UK government. So unless you've got funds and private funds of your own to have your own legal team that are impartial, then you've got no way of winning cases. So let's get this straight now. People who are on legal aid, if you think your lawyer is acting for your best interest, think again. Your own lawyer will say it's best for you to just admit that legal threshold, because then it gives them extra rights, the other side, to take your children away from you. So I've come across a lot of cases where people have had legal aid funding. I funded my own legal team, but I've come across so many people who've had lawyers under legal aid, solicitors, representing themselves in court, who've used QCs, and they're all funded, and they all ask you, just admit legal threshold. They are there to help the government take your children away. They don't become solicitors to fight for your children. Mm-hmm. They're corrupt in the fact they just want the funding. They just want the business from legal aid, which is a UK government funded fee. Mm-hmm. So please be aware that this event is still corrupt. The lawyers are corrupt. The social workers don't become social workers to keep families together. It's to take children away. You don't become a social worker today to work with families. They don't work with families. They don't work with victims of depression and keeping families together. They don't work with men and women who have gone through domestic violence, or soldiers, or anyone else who's going through PTSD or whatever else. They only become social workers to take children away from loving homes and get them forcibly adopted, and to get large amounts of money for their local authority. This is what it's all about. Judges, circuit judges, family circuit judges, high court judges, if you look at statistics, right, 99.6% of cases ahead who are heard in family courts all go for the local authority. So you've got less than 0.4% chance of getting your children back. That in itself is a scary thought. They said, would I be a confidential informer for protection? So what do I need protection for? Well, things can happen to you, and, we can make sure that those things that you're protected. I said, why are you threatening me? No, we're not threatening you, but if you're ever in a sticky situation you can't get out of, you've got us on your side and we can make it evaporate. So can you bring my children back to me? They said, well, that's a tricky situation. We could look into it, especially the other two, maybe not the youngest two, but the other one's not adopted yet. I said, you think I'm going to sell out my child to be a confidential informer? You're wrong. They were offering me incitement rewards such as one of my children back if I become a confidential informer, and I would not do it. I'm sorry, I would feel that I'm betraying my fellow people, and I couldn't do that. You're not using my children as bargaining chips for me to become a confidential informant. And I'll be totally open with you. I was arrested in my household in January because I was distressed. My friends take my life last January because of what happened to my children and what they did to me. The judge emailed me late at night saying that my children, he emailed me at 9 p.m. in January saying that my children, before even seeing the court hearing the next day, saying my children be removed for forced adoption. So obviously I was in my household and said I'm gonna kill myself. So there was a standoff with the local bobbies trying to kick my door in. I said, you fucking come in here, right? And believe me, you're not gonna come out. I'm gonna bat the fuck out of you. They said, just come out. Let's just talk this out on the phone to me. I said, look, I don't want to cause any harm to any person. But if you come into my home, I'm going to protect myself and my home. They said, look, we just want to do a welfare check on you to make sure you're okay. We know you're upset. We're scared in case you're going to commit suicide. We're outside. Let us see.
Why do they even care? Like, why are they even caring when they're giving you all the incentive?
They were just using that as harassment. It was harassment. They were harassing me at my home address, doing welfare checks on me so they can just build up a bigger, stronger case. It ended up with them kicking the fucking door in, coming in my property and arresting me for a public order offence on a private dwelling. It's unheard of. It's fucking unheard of. I was never in public. I was not on a public road. I was in my household. Never once did I come out of my home. Once I come out of my home, if I started shouting out a window or I come outside my property and started yelling abuse, then it's a public order offence because they can now then arrest you. I was in my private dwelling, went to court, pleaded not guilty, didn't even get a jury, didn't get any jury at all, and I was charged with a public order offence on a private dwelling.
Wow.
I've now got a criminal record for a public order, first criminal record ever. So in November when this happened to me, they said, well, you know, we can wipe your criminal record off. So I think this was all because I was part of the groups way back in 2019. I reckon it was all planted. I reckon now, looking back now, because they said to me, as me being a confidential informer, they could revoke my probational supervision period, that I'm on probation for. And by the way, I got £600 fine for it as well, for something that I should never have been charged with in the first place with. At all. If anything, they should have took me to a psychiatric hospital to obtain help, which they didn't do. They just locked me up, charged me with a public order for offence on a private dwelling, which is unheard of. When I told my solicitor, they said they can't charge you with that. My solicitor argued, they said, how can my client be charged with a public order when he was on a private dwelling? The judge said, well, we are. And I find him guilty. I was like, what the fuck? My solicitor was like, you can appeal this. But it was a Crown Court judge sitting on a magistrate. How is that strange? There was magistrates not sitting there. We're getting Crown Court judge sitting on magistrates convicting people. That's a breach of the Criminal Justice Act. Why is a Crown Court judge sitting on a magistrate's bench? They shouldn't be doing it. So I was found guilty for a public order offence on a private dwelling, which is unlawful. Fast forward in November now, I think it was all premeditated by them. I really do. If things don't add up, the email at 9 p.m. saying that my children would be forcibly adopted back in January 21 from a judge, and then me sparking off, and then just happens. How did they know I was depressed? They would come to do a welfare check on me. They said they got a concern for my well-being. I didn't contact anyone that evening. Things don't add up, and them saying that they can wipe my criminal record, possibly get my oldest child back if I come. They were giving me incentives to become a confidential informant. I wouldn't sell out. I believe that I'm not the only one. Things don't add up. I was being pulled over every 5 minutes. Oh, we're just doing a welfare check. My registration numbers were flagged up every time I was going anywhere. I was getting pulled over. Jay, we just want to check if you're okay. I said, what the fuck have you pulled me? It was harassment. It was constant harassment. It's a way to wind me down so I break. It just blew my head in that they could use children as bargaining chips. The Mi5 were using, military intelligence were using my child to get my child back to me. How can you use children as a reward, incentive to be a confidential informer for military intelligence? I truly believe that they are running scared. The French High Commission have condemned the UK of forced adoptions. The French High Commission were disgusted over it. Russia are a big backer of a breach of human rights. And, if Russia says something seriously wrong, then... And I always think to people, especially asylum seekers, why the fuck would you want to come to the UK? And there's people like me who wish to have asylum in Russia. Now, that just tells you a lot.